Martina here, and in this episode we're gonna go through how to carve and stain leather. So here I have a couple of tools we're gonna need to carve this book. First of all, I have a spray bottle of water. I have the patterns that I want to carve on the cover and on the spine. And here I have a couple of carving tools, some to make some deeper indents and shadows, some punches to make backgrounds, and a swivel knife, which we will use to carve the patterns. As we talked about in the previous episode when we glued the leather to the book, you have to case the leather before you can start shaping it and doing any impressions on it. So that's why I have a spray bottle, just so I can spray down all the surfaces that I want to carve on. And I'm really just targeting the areas where I know I'm gonna carve. Now that the leather is damp, the fibers in the leather soften up so that you're actually able to make any kind of impressions on it. We don't want to start carving right away after we've sprayed it. We want to wait for a little bit until the color becomes almost its natural color while it's still a little damp. If it's too wet, then the fibers are too soft and it's just going to be a hard time carving and you might end up doing more damage than you want to. So we're going to leave this to dry for a little bit and come back when it's ready to be carved. Now, before I start using my swivel knife, I want to use this tool right here that has a really pointed tip to mark out the outlines of my carvings. You could draw on a pattern with a pencil. It's not going to be that visible, but there is a possibility that the pencil marks will be visible later. I have previously used some tape to hold my templates in place, but the tape can leave some marks on the leather, which is not very nice. So now I'm just gonna gently go over the lines with this pointed tip. And as you can see, that leaves a very visible mark underneath. I'm not even pushing down very hard, but the leather becomes very, very impressionable when it's just slightly damp. So carving is actually pretty simple. Once you've transferred your pattern to your book, you just go over that same pattern with a swivel knife, just like this. So this is how you hold a swivel knife. You lean this finger here and you use your thumb and the other fingers to twist and turn the blade. Once you've transferred your pattern to your book, you just go over those same lines with a swivel knife. So just a note, you should try to keep your swivel knife as sharp as possible to get the cleanest lines. Just as a note, if this is your first time carving, make sure to take lots of breaks because this can be really tiring for your wrist and your hand, and you will be exhausted before you realize it. So just make sure to carve for maybe 5 to 10 minutes, take a 5 to 10 minute break and go back again. Make sure to not exhaust your wrist. We've transferred the lines using this pointed tool. Then we went over the lines with a swivel knife, and now we're going to use this end to make some shadows around the carvings we've already made. So this is just going to make a bit more of a 3D effect around the carvings, and then we can use our backgrounding tools to create even more depth in the carving. So now that we are completely finished with the carving, we can move on to staining. It's important to do the carving before the staining, because if you carve after, you will have to wet the leather, and that can cause the color to become very uneven. My main color is going to be this rich dark brown stain with some black detailing on the carvings. I got my cutting mat laid out here because if this stain touches anything, it will stain it permanently, so I'm just making sure to not stain the table. You can either use a piece of cloth or you can use a sponge to apply the stain. As we've already attached the leather to the book, we gotta make very sure and be very careful about not getting any stain on the text block. So if you want, you can put something in between here to protect it from the stain. So I'm just putting a little bit on my sponge. If I think I have too much, I'll just dab it a bit on the paper. And it's better to build up the color, so you go from a little too light and make it darker than just apply a lot the first time and then make it too dark on the first try. And as you can see, this sponge has soaked a lot of this color, and I want to just go in circles. And of course I'm wearing gloves to not stain my hands. There will probably be a couple of parts on the carving that can be hard to reach with the sponge, so those parts I'm just gonna go over again with a brush later, because it's easier to get into all the little nooks and crannies. And now I'm just gonna do the inside of the cover here, and I'm being very careful when I go down towards the spine, down towards the paper, and make sure not to get any stain on the paper. And here we have it, a stained book ready for gold leaf. So now, just to summarize, in order to carve the leather, you have to case it first, meaning you have to soak it in water. Then you can use different carving tools and a swivel knife to carve out your patterns. And finally, when staining the leather, make sure to apply a thin layer at a time so that you build up the color and get the color you want. You can also use several different colors to get some more depth and variation in your design.